Good evening. Good evening and welcome to Q&A live from the very lively Dockland studios in Melbourne. I'm Tony Jones, here to answer your questions tonight. Former President of the Australian Medical Association, Dr. Kerryn Phelps, the Managing Director of the Australian Christian Lobby, Lyle Shelton, the Labor Speaker who brought the House to order between Peter Slipper and Bronwyn Bishop, Anna Burke, the former Minister for Small Business, Bruce Billson, and the Chief Executive of Roy Morgan Research, Michele Levine. Please welcome our panel. Now, pay attention for a moment, because if you're watching Q&A in Queensland, South Australia, the Northern Territory and Western Australia, remember you can watch Q&A live as it goes to air on ABC News 24. Well, earlier today we polled our Facebook followers. They want tonight's Q&A to discuss the Safe Schools program, marriage equality and Malcolm Turnbull's leadership. Well, let's go straight to those topics and our first question, which comes from Chilla White.
I've taken my children out of Frankston High School because of the content of the Safe Schools Coalition program. I have no religious affiliation, but I believe it is biology that defines what sex you are, not radical gender theory. I did not feel comfortable with my daughter sharing restrooms or PE change rooms with the boys who wished to identify as girls, and withdrew her enrolment into Year 7 this year. Are my concerns legitimate?
Lyle Shelton, start with you.
Thanks very much, Tony, and thanks, Chilla, for the question. I think none of us want to see children bullied for any reason whatsoever, for no reason. I think it goes without saying that bullying is unacceptable, full stop. But we've been aware for some 12 months or more now of the content of this so-called Safe Schools program, and as Chilla rightly says in a question, the Safe Schools material itself actually asks schools to change their bathroom policy to allow boys who are identifying as girls to be in the same bathroom as young girls, and also to share accommodation on school camps. It says that gender is not uniform, with a picture of a boy wearing a girl's school uniform. So I think a lot of parents would be rightly concerned about this, that this goes way beyond an anti-bullying program.
Kerryn Phelps, are our questioners' concerns legitimate?
I don't think our questioners' concerns are legitimate at all. What we do know is that LGBTI students are much more likely to suffer from bullying, from physical and verbal abuse. They are much more likely to suffer from anxiety and depression, and they're more likely to do suicide. Now, the question is, what do we do about this? Do we want our schools to be safe places where all students, no matter what their gender orientation, their sexual orientation is, in any diverse form, different children who perhaps are a little bit more nerdy or bookish than other children, who are bullied because of their appearance or because they're not like the other children? We have to have programs that are in place that have young students having a look at what life is like in the shoes of that student. Now, what Safe Schools does, it's an opt-in program. The schools have to require a request from the principal to be involved. The teachers are provided with resource materials, and the teachers deliver the program. It's in response to a problem that is seen within the schools. And unless you have a Safe Schools program like this, none of the other anti-bullying programs were addressing the problems for LGBTI students.
Tony, I don't think that's quite right, if I could just jump in there. I know that
well,
here
you
in
can,
Victoria...
but actually I'd just like to quickly go... I'll come back to you, but I'd just like to quickly go back to our questioner, Chilla White, because can I bring you in just to sort of ask, are your concerns as narrow as who uses the school toilets, or do they go more broad?
I've got a lot. The program's huge. So, yeah, I have heaps of concerns, basically.
The content is along the lines of the national curriculum and for PDHPE, and the teachers deliver the material. Now, clearly, in the particular school you're talking about, there was an identified problem with a child or a couple of children who were identifying as transgender. Now, those children deserve respect. They deserve to be treated with due respect and with care and with kindness. And to have a Safe Schools program where the other children are taught to understand the perspective of that student, to my mind, is good for all students. It's good for the entire school community.
Now, Chella, if you want us to come back to you, put up your hand. But in the meantime, we've actually got a question from one of the authors of the Safe Schools program in Victoria, Christopher Bush. Where's Christopher? Down here.
I'm one of the people who wrote the Safe Schools Coalition resource, and I'm also a high school teacher. We created the resource because principals and teachers asked us to. We know from Beyond Blue and La Trobe University that our resources are needed. There's less self-harm and less suicide. There's more acceptance and more understanding when they're in place. This program is a lifeline for kids. I've taught it and it works. Mr. Shelton, I'd love for you to come and see me teach students values of empathy, respect and understanding of LGBTI students. Do you truly understand the impact of what you're trying to take away?
I think there should, of course, be empathy and respect for every student, regardless of their identity or regardless of anything that's going on in their life. And we know that the major cause of bullying in school is because of body image issues. Now, that's not to say that kids don't get bullied because of their gender identity or sexuality, but we've got programs in schools here in Victoria, the Bully Stoppers program, which does address homophobic bullying. I think you can address bullying without then going to contested gender ideology. And this is contested. I mean, people like Germaine Greer and the feminist movement do not go along at all with this. And studies that have been done of transgendered people who have had sex reassignment surgery, people who have been followed for some 20 or so years, have found that after 10 years of, from the surgery, that their suicide mortality rate was actually 20 times higher than the non-transgendered population. So I'm very concerned that here we are encouraging young people to do things to their bodies, and the -18 website, which Safe Schools promotes and tells kids that if they can't access it, that they should go to the teacher and have it unblocked. This actually encourages practices to kids' bodies like chest binding for young girls to compress their breast tissue, penis tucking. Now, this is taking kids on a trajectory that may well cause them to want to take radical action such as gender reassignment surgery, which even Johns Hopkins Hospital in the US, which pioneered this work, now no longer does. So I think we can teach... Well, just a minute, if I can just say one thing.
Well,
we can
actually,
teach respect
let the
without,
questioner jump in, Lyle, because you'll get plenty of chance to
Mr.
talk.
Shelton, I'm not sure if you've read the program aims of what the Safe Schools Coalition resource is trying to do. It is simply not the things that you're discussing. I'll put it to you like this. If Christian kids were 6 times more likely to commit suicide than their non-Christian peers, would you not want a resource in schools that reverse that trend, that stop that from happening? You would be incensed, and we would all be wrong for not stepping in and doing something.
Christopher, can I just... I'd just like Christopher, as one of the authors of the report, just to address some of the specifics that Lyle Sheldon was talking about there, some of the things that your program links to, the -18 program.
-18 is a youth-led LGBTI organisation. It's Australia's largest, and there is content on that website that helps transgender kids fit more the gender that they know themselves to be. The reason that kids need to do this to their bodies is because they're being bullied in school. If they weren't being harassed at school, then perhaps they wouldn't need to chest bind, as there are content on the -18 website which says and helps them to do that.
I think with respect, though, that I think the issue
is not the content of the Safe Schools Coalition Australia. It is not the content of the resource.
Well, it is actually.
Also
if you look through the Safe Schools Coalition material, -18 is referenced right through the material, and kids are told that if they can't access it, they should go to their teacher, ask why it's blocked and have it unblocked, including the other controversial links which George Christensen mentioned in Parliament this week. And I note the Toolshed link went down off the -18 website within moments of Mr. Christensen's speech in the House of Representatives. Now, that website is just horrific in the material, the sexualised content of that material. And he's quite right to say that if I sat down with a kid and showed a kid those links, I would be in a lot of trouble. So I just don't understand why a program which is about teaching respect, and I think respect is the key thing. No one should be bullied at school. But you've got to look at the fact that this is gender theory. This is not anti-bullying. This is gender theory, which is disputed by feminists.
All right, okay. I'll just quickly get back to our question. And then I do want to hear Go ahead. I want to hear from the rest of the panel, but just make your point quickly.
Ignoring the existence of transgender or gay kids is not going to solve the problem. We can dispute theories from many years ago, but the reality is that these kids exist in our schools today, and we need to help them.
And we do need to help them.
Okay, all right. I'm going to go across the panel. Bruce Billson, the lady who asked the first question, Chella White, is actually from your electorate.
She is.
Pulled her maybe two of her children out of the school in your electorate. So what's your response to all of this?
Well, I mean, this is the resource. And I had a lot of feedback arguing both what Chella's described, other families concerned that their voice in the education and the opt-in facility that's designed to be part of it wasn't afforded to them. Others have contacted me encapsulating what you've outlined, sir. It's been transformational in the lives of some. That's why the government said, well, let's have a look at the resource material. The Foundation for Young Australians that oversees the coalition thinks that's a great idea, whether it's age appropriate, whether they are the resources that builds inclusiveness, and also whether the parent and the school community has a proper opportunity to engage in this process. There's talk about safe rooms for kids that might find these conversations difficult, and there's also an awareness that this isn't easy to teach either, and it tries to help the teachers navigate that. So.
To navigate these tasks, and we worked with the people who wrote the Australian curriculum to ensure that this was mapped to years 7 and 8 accurately. And
that's been observed on the way through, that it is there, it is aligned to the curriculum, and the review is timely. There are concerns. Let's have a look at it.
Are you broadly in favour of the idea of actually creating a kind of safe program for children at risk?
Whatever the cause of the bullying, there is no place for bullying in our schools, whatever the cause. Now, if we've got an opportunity to deal with that, to have people respected for who they are, and some that are navigating their sexuality, that must be incredibly challenging. But let them learn, let them feel safe, the education outcomes are better. We just need to make sure this is the right toolkit, and thank you for your input, and also for Chella. They're the two issues that we really need to look at: quality of the content, parental engagement, what school community's doing, let the kids learn.
Michele, does public opinion tell us anything about the broad view of these programs?
Yes, look, I think public opinion is telling us quite clearly. Roy Morgan's been surveying how people feel about these broad issues for many, many years. And as a nation, we're changing. As a nation, we're becoming much more open-minded about people's sexuality. There's now majority support for gay couples adopting children. So, 20 years ago, that was a very minority view. Now, it's the majority. So as a nation, we're becoming a lot more open-minded. I think one of the things that goes with that, though, is any parent has to choose what's right for their child. So if they feel uncomfortable, and, the data also shows us that 20% of people believe that homosexuality is immoral. So people who have those views are bound to feel uncomfortable. They have choices. But I think as a nation, we are becoming much more open to all of these things, and I look forward to, and I expect to see, a day when this won't be needed, when these children will just be, just like any other child. And I think we've seen that. We saw when the young Italians and Greeks came when I was at school, they had real difficulties because they were different, they were other, and they were bullied. Wouldn't it have been great if the teachers actually knew how to handle that phenomenon? And over time, there are always people who are different. My children were in a program where there was a deaf program, and there was an outrage. Why should why should our children have to be in a classroom with a deaf child who's going to take all of the attention? There's always another side to it. But I think society is moving in a way that we'll see this as a very natural progression, and it won't even be needed, hopefully.
I'm going to go back to our original questioner. You've been listening to the discussion, Chella White. I know that you've publicly said that you were disturbed to find that your son had been offered the opportunity to, in the following year, to wear a dress to school. That's something that seemed to disturb you a lot. Tell us why.
It was a blanket approach, and they were sitting in science class, and I just didn't think that it had anything to do with what they were trying to learn in the class, and it was for every child sitting there. And Frankston High had told me that they didn't have any transgender children, so I just thought it's a funny approach for people sitting there that don't sort of have that affliction.
Anna Burke.
There's been 515 schools that have opted into the program. It's a voluntary program, and usually the schools identify and go to the creators of this program. And as Bruce has, we've all gone and looked it up and read through what is the actual All of Us program that's being taught to the Year 7 and 8s. It's not what Lyle has described at all. None of that is actually part of the program taught at school. For individuals who are looking for that, there's information out there because those kids are going to find it anyway. And I think we'd rather them find it in a safe environment than them finding it on their own or being confronted, confused and suicidal. I mean, that's one of the big things we need to... You've had a pretty good go.
You're not the speaker anymore, though.
No, I'm not. No, sorry, old habits die hard.
Right.
But we need to get, myth from reality in this debate. What is being offered in the schools is something that the schools work through with the principal, with the teachers, and it should have been worked through with the parents as well. If you weren't afforded that opportunity, you should have been. So the community should have been brought on board. And it's like any program that's offered in a school, especially if it's something that is controversial and people find confronting. But unless we allow our children to know that there are people out there that identify differently, and unless we knock out the prejudices, then the other children are going to feel exposed. Now, I have nephews from a rainbow background. They are magnificent children. I don't want them going to school feeling that they're different from anybody else. I want my nephews to know that they're as precious and as wonderful as any other child coming from any family. And I think this is programmed just about that. At the end of the day, we're all just human beings.
Lyle, hold on. Let's go to a question on one of the issues raised earlier by Lyle Shelton. It's from Diane Grocott.
I'd like to know whether the Safe Schools program is informing students of the clinical studies that show that up to 80% of kids who are unhappy with their gender, if left alone with no intervention whatsoever, the fact that they turn out to be embracing their biological sex eventually. That's about 80%, and those studies have been cited by an expert in the transgender area, Dr. Paul McHugh, who was in charge of the Johns Hopkins gender reassignment surgery, and he actually found out that this surgery wasn't doing the job that they were hoping. He said people, the follow-up studies, as Lyle said, they showed that people were troubled beforehand, and after the surgery, they're probably happy for some time, but round about the 10-year mark, they're often quite troubled. And I think it's important that students should understand that the fluidity of teenage years is quite normal, and 80% of them do become quite happy with the gender that they were previously. Sorry, I've seen a microphone. You said not to worry about that. The gender that they were previously trying to reject or deny. So I'm thinking we probably need to look at the safe schools where they're saying transgender feelings are normal and you should go along with them. And the other fact of the OMG I'm Trans booklet, which I don't know if it's part of it, but it says that it's a total lie that boys have penises and girls have vaginas. So is that part of the national curriculum, that we should teach our children that it's a lie that boys have male genitalia and girls have female genitalia?
Okay, we'll actually start with Kerryn Phelps.
Look, I'm just wondering if any of you people have actually met someone who's transgender and actually had a discussion with them. Because it's not an easy road, and the whole idea of the Safe Schools program is to just ease the way for people, regardless of where they end up in terms of their gender, for the other people around them to treat them with respect and kindness and compassion and empathy. Now, these are human values. Now, in terms of what medical path these people take, there is an enormous amount of counselling that goes into this. There's an enormous amount of psychological help that goes through until everybody is satisfied that the right option for this individual at the correct age is for them to go through a transitioning process. Now, that really isn't the role of the Safe Schools program at all. The role of the Safe Schools program is to respect an individual at whatever particular state of their development, psychologically and physically, they are at that moment, at that particular time. It's not up to a Safe Schools program or the schools indeed to be teaching anything about outcomes for adult transsexual or transgender individuals. And so, you know, I think that quoting these sorts of statistics is really unhelpful in this environment.
Lyle Shelton.
Yeah, these are statistics from clinical studies, Kerryn.
A clinical study
yeah,
that you're quoting, that none of us have seen, that, you know, is taken out of context as usual. And so what I think we have to do really is to step back and say, what is it that we're asking about here? And one of the things that really
Kerryn, we have to also
me,
step back and allow Lyle Shelton to answer the question.
If I can say that one of the things that has really distressed many of us who are working in this space is the rhetoric and the nastiness that is coming from places like our own Senate. And I think, quite frankly, we could do with a Safe Senate program, where our senators were put through a program of understanding, empathy, compassion and kindness.
All right, OK. Lyle Shelton.
Well, Kerryn, I don't think it's a clinical study taken out of context. John Hopkins pioneered gender reassignment surgery in the 70s. Paul McHugh is a well-respected practitioner in that area, and they realised it wasn't giving the outcomes for people, it wasn't causing them to be happy, as Di said. And that Swedish study studied over 300 people over about 30 years, between 1973 and about 2003, and found that the suicide mortality rate was 20 times higher than the non-transgendered population. Now, we've heard a bit about suicide on the panel here tonight. I had a look at Beyond Blue and what they say about young LGBTI people. Now, I don't want to see anyone commit suicide. I don't want to see a nasty debate that affects young people at all. I'm not interested in that. But it is ideation that Beyond Blue talk about, that those thinking about suicide is higher, and that's a terrible thing. But thank God that it doesn't seem to be that there's a actual higher gay suicide rate in Australia. Now, I don't ever want it to come to that, but we have to be able to discuss these things without using this very emotive language to stop people like Michele and other parents who've got legitimate concerns about these sort of programs from having a say. And I think a lot of parents, we all sign on to no bullying, but should we have this contested gender theory when we know that people like John Hopkins can see real concerns about that actually being taught in our schools? Let's just have a non-bullying program.
Let's hear from another parent at a very different perspective. Next question is from Belinda James.
The research shows that a significant number of gender diverse youth suffer significant mental health issues, and I suppose more than 50% of them attempt suicide or self-harm. As the mother of a gender diverse child that's 7 years old, I'd like to know what steps you believe need to be taken in order to support and I suppose provide a better outcome for these children.
Let's hear from Bruce Billson first.
Yeah, well, thanks, Belinda. And I guess this is all about making sure that that learning journey is as supportive and as nurturing as it can be. I imagine there'll be lots of questions that your son will have over his life or her life journey. And I'm not sure this is about actually trying to guide those choices. It's actually trying to make sure that that learning experience is as positive as it can be. That's the purpose of the program. A lot of the other discussions we're having now, very important issues about decision points in people's lives, and I think they're valid discussions to have, but this is actually about making sure as your son navigates that journey, that at least the learning opportunity is supportive and nurturing, and that's what we should all be aiming for. The other decisions that will be a part of the life ahead of your family, this doesn't aim to push you one way or the other. I'm not even sure where you'd go for advice about that, and I admire your engagement on what can't be an easy thing for your family to navigate either.
Belinda, could I ask you if you could explain to those who don't know what you mean by saying your 7-year-old is gender diverse? What does that actually mean?
Well, I suppose has always identified, was born biologically male, but has always identified as female. Was diagnosed with gender dysphoria some 2 years ago, and has only just recently socially transitioned because I suppose it was getting to the point where the level of anxiety and distress was having an enormous impact on his mental health, and along with the support of the Royal Children's Hospital, where he's been attending, or he has been attending over the last year or so, we made the decision to allow that transition, social transition, to take place. So
And,
I was,
can I ask, this is all about the potential for bullying and ways of dealing with it. Are you worried yourself?
I suppose my question was that if there's discussion of the removal of the Safe Schools program, then what other sort of program or what other support do you think can be provided to these children, or how can we educate the teachers and the staff to be able to support gender diverse children, or to know how to handle it with the other children? So it's not so much when I say I was concerned about the future of my child in terms of if we remove Safe Schools, then who's going to come in and educate everyone?
Kerryn Phelps, I'll bring you back in there briefly if we can.
I think it's very important that the Safe Schools inquiry does go ahead so that we can see the successes of the program, so that people can have a chance to actually really have a look at the program and to see its outcomes, and hopefully to increase the funding, because at the moment it's only $8 million over 4 years, which is $2 million a year. The school chaplaincy program's $248 million a year, and it's never been investigated for its outcomes. And so maybe there's some diversion of funds into that we can obtain.
Lyle, Shelton, I'll get a brief answer from you as well, if I can.
I just think for Belinda's situation, because this is very much contested area, I mean, the obvious thing is...
it doesn't sound like the doctors in this case are contesting it, if I may say so.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, if you look at these
Well,
studies
you're not
that
sure,
we've
but I
been citing,
imagine Belinda is sure.
there may be some doctors, but this is something which is...
You can't just say it doesn't exist. You can't just say it doesn't happen.
No,
we
I
have
wasn't saying
people.
that.
Well, you're saying it's contested, which means that you're invalidating Linda's child's experience.
No, that's not right, Kerryn. I'm not invalidating the experience. This does happen. People do have gender dysphoria, or they have sometimes phases of confusion, and particularly young people do. But as Di said earlier, the studies show that if no intervention is taken, 80% of young people by puberty stick with the gender, their biological gender. Now, my concern is by introducing this sort of thing, we might create even more confusion amongst young people, and particularly with the more extreme things that are promoted by -18, which Safe Schools says kids must have access to. I mean, if a kid becomes infertile because of penis tucking, or does some sort of damage because of the chest binding that's promoted, I mean, these things are quite extreme, and I just think because this is very much contested, we should have a good look at the science and the clinical studies, and to make sure that children like yours are given all the support and help that they can be. But it's got to be based. It's got to be based on the right sort of science.
All of us was introduced for children just like yours, so that when they get to school, they're not confronted by people who don't accept their decisions. A brave, brave decision, and that's supported by the family. So that is literally why this program was introduced, so that there was something out there that people could use. Because most of the teachers were saying, we don't know how to deal with this. And it's not the excesses Lyle's going on about. You know, it is not. This is a totally different program, and you need to separate the two things out completely.
So Anna, would you accept?
Okay, sorry, let's hear...
So just as part of the Prime
Well,
Minister's review that he ordered, would you accept the de-linking of Safe Schools from -18 through all its material?
I think you've got to look at the whole program as a whole, and the -18 is...
So it is there, yeah.
No, the -18 is referred as a resource for those individuals to use, not to be educated in the school. Because those children, those parents are looking for a resource. It is not what is educated, it is not what is taught in this program. This program is teaching people about respecting diversity. Surely that's what we should be encouraging across the board for everything.
Okay, I'm going to move this on. Thank you. Let's move to a different aspect of this debate. The next question comes from Janet White.
Thanks, Tony. In 2013, our Prime Minister, Julia Gillard at the time, delivered the national apology for forced adoption, saying at that time that government policy, bureaucracy and institutions had broken the most primal and sacred bond there is between a mother and a baby. In 2016, we're looking at coming to a national plebiscite on same-sex marriage, and in doing so we're being asked to establish another policy which breaks that bond. If we in fact allow two men the right to marry, we deliberately establish motherless families in an ideal in our law, as an ideal in our law. How can this policy be right when the last policy was wrong?
Michele Levine, I'll bring you in first.
Okay. So as I said, Australians are becoming much more open in their views about these things. Today, 76% of people say that gay people should be allowed to marry. Only in 2011, that was 68%. But clearly, this is a very strong majority of people hold that view. Those people who are against gay people marrying or marriage equality, and we wouldn't ask the question marriage equality because people wouldn't understand necessarily what that meant. That's a term that's coined. But those people who are against gay people being able to marry are predominantly concerned about the word marriage. So they're very happy for them to live together, to have the same rights as any other married couple. But there's a thing about marriage. Some of them are concerned about the religious aspects of it. So they're just, it's my religion. It's those sorts of things. A small proportion are just so homophobic that anything to do with gay people sends shivers up their spine.
Michele, what about the very specifics of the question was about children? It was particularly about, well, two men in a gay relationship bringing up children, but you can broaden it out because there's a general argument about does the polling tell you anything about that?
Yep.
The views on that?
So 63% of people, that's 2/3 of Australians, say homosexual couples should be allowed to adopt children. So this is whether they're married or not. The majority of Australians have moved towards accepting this point of view. And obviously it's not across the board. I mean, it's very interesting. It's a political hot potato because Green supporters are much more likely to believe that homosexual couples should adopt children. Labor supporters are more likely. Liberal National Party supporters, no, just under 50%. So here's where you find something that becomes political. But overall, there is a move towards this kind of acceptance. And can I say about gay people being able to get married, there were a few people that raised issues about the children, but not very many. And I personally don't think that you can equate taking children from their parents with something like gay couples being able to marry and have children. It just doesn't make
Billson,
sense.
we heard that spelled out eloquently. On your side of politics, fewer people support same-sex marriage, obviously, within your government, fewer still. But what do you think about the core question the questioner just asked there? She said, would same-sex marriage laws break the primal and sacred bond between a mother and her baby?
I wouldn't have thought so. The issue of how relationships are recognised is at the heart of the identity of the relationships. I've been arguing for a long time we should respect the way people like to have their identity reflected in the institutions of our country. I, for many years, argued leave marriage as it is, but put committed life partnerships forward as a way of publicly attesting one's love and durable commitment to each other. That's not satisfactory in the current mode. I thought whether we should have marriage for the vast majority of people that aren't beholden to a proper noun definition of marriage, and maybe call the proper noun definition traditional marriage. Look at more people are getting married outside churches now. All this is happening. What I think and what I'm concerned about is with the plebiscite, it's kind of a binary choice. It's sort of one side of the argument feels like they might be winning and the other side feeling like they're not, and the plebiscite might flip it the other way. That's not a durable solution. We need to properly recognise everyone's relationships, recognise that identity is at the heart of this, but just as same-sex couples want their relationships properly identified, there's a lot of traditional married people want to have that identification as well, and I just think we haven't worked hard enough to navigate a pathway through those different ambitions for relationship identity.
What happened to that plebiscite, by the way? Has your government even come up with a question that would be asked in the plebiscite?
Well, there's a time frame and there's some clarity around...
Some time after the next election is a time frame.
That's right. You're
frame?
very perceptive, Tony. I give you great credit for following that.
After you've gone.
That's an insightful observation you've shared with the audience. But that's on track, and that's a commitment that's made, and that's a commitment that will be honoured.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to. I will bring you in, but I just want to get another question, same subject, and it's relevant to hear from both of these perspectives. From Georgia Weymouth Large, then we'll hear from the other side of the panel.
Thank you. I come from a same-sex parented family. I live with my younger brother and my two mums who have been together for 32 years now. The proposed plebiscite has the potential to cause a great deal of harm to families like mine and the LGBTQI+ community. A public debate will give the religious right an excuse to attack and degrade our families. I want to ask the panel how this plebiscite can be justified, not only given its enormous expense, but more importantly, given the harm that it'll do to many, many people.
Lyle, Shelton, I'll start with you.
Well, Georgia, the first thing is that no one wants to see any harm come to anyone, and no one wants to denigrate any people or anyone's parenting abilities. But the concern, I guess, and the main objection to changing the definition of marriage really does go to the heart of Janet's question earlier, which wasn't really answered. Michele talked about polling on adoption, but her question went to breaking the primal bond between a mother and her baby. Now, what I guess we've got to realise is that under Article 16 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it says that men and women of marriageable age have the right to marry and found a family. Now, that's common sense as well. But for two men or for two women to found a family, that involves quite often, and particularly if we start with this new policy of redefining marriage, it's not biologically possible for them to do that. And that's not a statement of animus or prejudice against anyone, that's just a statement of biology. So we have to then look at areas of assisted reproductive technology, anonymous sperm donation potentially, and then commercial surrogacy for men. Now, that involves taking a baby away from its mother, from the breast of its mother, and giving it to two men. Now,
so Lyle, can I just to sort of sharpen this a bit? This is a quote.
I think that's pretty sharp, Tony.
This is a quote that's attributed to you, so sure. you can deny it if you like. The fact is, every child in a same-sex family structure has been taken from its biological mother or father. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it is actually, Tony. That is a sharp
you know
statement.
I'm sitting right here, don't you?
Yeah, I do, Kerryn. And I bear no
know
real
that but you know what you're saying is complete nonsense.
But Kerryn, I know that you're
I'm sorry. Can we allow people to express their opinions in peace?
It's not actually complete nonsense, Kerryn. There's many same-sex couples like yourself who are raising kids that have come from a previous relationship.
What's it got to do with marriage? What's it got to do with marriage? I mean, two 18-year-olds in the back seat of a borrowed car can procreate. It doesn't have anything to do with marriage or with parenting ability. Nothing whatsoever.
So,
and the foster system, the child protection system, the Human Rights Commission has just said that the child protection system is overwhelmed with cases of children from biological parents that they cannot cope with, the number of children who have to be removed because of abuse or neglect from this idealised family that you talk about. But, you know, I have people in my family who married in their 70s. Procreation's got absolutely nothing to do with them. You can get married and not have children. You can have children and not get married. The two things you are trying to link when, in fact, they don't really have very much to do with each other.
Sorry, I just want to finish the point. So I'm interested in what you mean by taken. I mean, do you literally mean stolen? Are you talking no, I'm serious. Are you talking about a kind of stolen generation?
Well, we did take Indigenous children and babies from their mothers and give them to loving families. But the error that we apologised for was for taking them from their biological mother and father. Now, through assisted reproductive technology, we are taking the child from their biological father or their mother and giving them to someone else.
That is nothing to do with marriage. Lyle.
So what about a
nothing.
heterosexual couple? What about a heterosexual couple who have a child by assisted reproduction means? Are you denying the ability of everybody to have access to IVF or assisted reproduction?
I think there's some huge ethical issues with some of the ways that we go about assisted reproductive technology, and I think the rights of the child should come first, and marriage is this compound right to found and form a family. If you're going to take gender out of marriage, that's going to affect children, and we've already seen the same-sex political lobby, and as is their right, they are pushing for a lifting of Australia's prohibition on commercial surrogacy. Now that means rented wombs, eggs being paid for. It's got all sorts of ethical ramifications, and this will be a consequence of changing the definition of marriage, whether we like it or not.
Well, can I quickly go back to if you don't mind, just go back to our questioner, because she came from or comes from one of these families. So you expressed concern about the kind of debate that will emerge. Is this the sort of thing you're worried about?
Yeah, very worried about. Very, very worried about. I mean,
Georgia, thank you.
Yeah, I've always been told to stick up for myself in these kind of situations. I'm lucky enough to know my father and my brother, and we see him regularly. And a lot of families like mine see their dad, see their mum. I think you're going about it completely the wrong way. You know, laws have changed where kids can find their parents when they are used through IVF. That's something that's come about in recent years. I am concerned that this debate will bring a lot of hate to my family, and I don't want to see that. I mean,
no, I don't want to either, Georgia. I don't want to see any hate come to you.
Lyle, you don't seem to know when you're hurting people.
What you're saying right now is quite offensive to me and to my family. I mean, my parents are here and they're watching
I apologise
this.
for that, Georgia. That's not where I'm coming from. And you're fortunate. You are allowed to know your father. I've met some people who weren't allowed until they were 11 years old. Now that's great that your mum's let you do that. But not everyone will have that opportunity, and we've already had at least 2 parliamentary inquiries into donor-conceived children in this country. We know that there's ethical issues there, and public policy has to work for everyone, Georgia. I mean,
this is not about
that's
marriage.
Great. That's what happened for you.
This is not about marriage.
Well, unless you're
it's
going
a separate
to
debate,
amend the Marriage
Lyle.
Act so that same-sex couples aren't allowed to have children, Kerryn, and I don't think that's it is a
Same-sex
compound
couples
right.
can have children without being married.
Then how do you deal with the consequences of that?
I'm married in the US of A. It's not recognised in Australia yet. I have 3 children, and it's none of your business how they came about. Frankly.
Okay. Yes, you can.
The Marriage Act in law doesn't mention, do you love someone? Doesn't mention, are you going to have kids? It mentions, did you come here voluntarily? And it gives you a whole lot of stuff about when you separate. It actually, the law, which is what we are asked to look at and change, does not go into any of this argument. And I don't discount this argument. I actually sat in the Parliament when Gillard gave that very moving speech about those women losing their babies. I think to equate that to marriage equality is an absolute abomination for what those women went through.
What does the problem
and
bond
so, I think there's a huge issue about a primal bond. But what is it about love and having children? Does that come from marriage? No, I tell you now, as we've seen, there's people all over Australia who are already in same-sex relationships who have children. They didn't need to get married to do that. So this equation is wrong, and it's about the law. And before Howard changed the law, it actually didn't mention a man or a woman. It actually was silent on it. So let's not go down this path. And also, I think this debate alone shows why we do not need this plebiscite, why it will be so harmful to so many in our community, and why people in the Parliament who you've elected, whether you like us or not, you elected us. I hate to blame you lot, but it's all your own fault. You elected us to make those decisions about law. And that's where this should happen, and not having things that are already out there in these wonderful pamphlets where the Australian Christian Lobby is asking...
That's not us.
No, no, no.
thank you.
No, I know it's not you. No, I know it's not you.
Thanks for clarifying. I
No,
appreciate
no, no.
that.
It's not you. I know it's not you. But where the Australian Christian Lobby has asked to have racial vilification removed from this debate so that we can have very vilification, you know, the very vilification you're talking...
Anti-discrimination law.
Okay, so we're onto an issue of free speech, which actually anticipates the next question. I'm going to quickly throw to that. It comes from Rob Ward. Go ahead, Rob.
My question, Tony, goes to the very same issue, and that is, given the treatment given to Archbishop Porteous in Tasmania, where for the crime of stating Catholic Orthodox position and in fact supporting current law with a very benign and mild brochure, he's been dragged before the Anti-Discrimination Commission. How can we possibly have a free and honest debate? We've got a snowflake's chance in hell. In fact, the bigotry shown towards Lyle in this place tonight, the laughter shown towards him, shows we haven't got a chance. So what's the alternative? Those who support same-sex marriage and the rest of us are bigots?
Bruce Billson.
Oh, thanks, Tony.
It kind of, I think we're sort of, we're seeing a kind of a hint of what a plebiscite debate on this subject might be like. Does it worry you? I mean, the questioner who started this part of the conversation said it could become very hateful for her and her family. Other people are saying, oh, we're going to be locked out of the debate.
Well, I mean, if you were my daughter, Georgia, I couldn't be more proud. So whatever the influences are in your life, congratulations. But the issue about how those relationships are formally recognised is the discussion. And I think I alluded earlier to my concern about how binary it is, that people are screaming intolerance at people who just happen to have a different view. Now, I don't think that's very tolerant. And lo and behold, self-appointed tolerance monitors telling you that you're intolerant, they tend to be very intolerant. My concern about the plebiscite, which I alluded to earlier, was the binary nature of it. I think we have the wit to try and recognise and value and respect people who are looking to have their relationships given a proper noun that has been a statement about their identity and the relationship that we're in. Surely we can do that and give respect and the proper regard to...
Can I just make the point? Perhaps you could have by making the decision as politicians and lawmakers.
You didn't pick that up earlier,
well,
Tony.
I'm trying to.
I fed you that line earlier and you're a bit slow on the uptake. I couldn't believe it. But we've got to a point where we haven't been able to achieve that. Right. And because
this should be a decision of the Parliament taken without a plebiscite. Is that what
had that opportunity and we weren't able to conclude the matter.
That's
and
because it was a binding vote. It was a binding vote, not a free vote. That's why.
Well, for me, it was a bit more simple than that, and that was undertakings I gave my electorate, which was to respect those who have entered into a marriage under the proper noun in their mind of what that represented, but to find a pathway for committed life partners to have the opportunity to formally recognise, publicly celebrate, have respected and cherished the relationship pathway that they've chosen. That was my proposition and that was what I took to the electorate. And I'm honouring my undertaking to my electorate.
Now it's about equality. It's about justice, equality and fairness and respect.
Well, it's also around identity because, I mean, my friends that are same-sex and in relationships, they've found love and I'm thrilled for them. That is a terrific
And if they want to get
gift.
married, they don't have the choice.
And if they were looking for a way of having formal recognition and a public declaration of their commitment to each other, that machinery isn't that flash now. And we can improve that. We can improve that. But the title and the identity given to that relationship, in my mind, doesn't diminish the quality of the relationship. But it is something we need to work on. And I thought there was a way forward, but that was not found to be satisfactory. And now here we are on something of such strong opinions held quite diametrically. We're saying to the Australian community, well, here's your opportunity.
The Australian community, 76% of the Australian community are saying that they believe that marriage equality should go forward. And at the moment, our Parliament is not reflecting the will of the Australian people.
But the issue that we need to turn our mind to as well is that we were having a discussion earlier about people's journey through education where they were on a different pathway and they were feeling that wasn't being respected and validated. Now we're saying, well, a majority of people believe X hang those who don't agree. I mean, that's a different kind of discrimination, a different kind of intolerance. I think we should find a pathway that's inclusive of those different types of relationships, celebrate them, hope they're durable, and hope they can produce someone as special as Georgia. I mean, that's great, but that's the issue. How do we recognise and understand the identity issues that sit behind it and give proper respect to those relationships?
Michele, I'll bring you in here. A brief answer if we can, because we've got another question we need to go to on this subject.
Georgia, I had not thought of the points that you made. I think they're really important. When we look at the data, as we've said, the vast majority of people support marriage equality or gay people being able to get married. Those who don't, many of them are simply misinformed. So many of them are actually not aware that there is already equality in terms of economics. Many of them are talking about concerns about children when in fact it has nothing to do with children. So, you know, what it's raising, what the point that you've made is to maybe look at the data and realise that in fact this misinformation could become a big problem, and you would have these issues being thrown around. And it is misinformation, it's just not factual. So probably what we do need to do is to talk more about the fact that it is just the marriage. It's not going to change anything economically. It's not going to change anything about children. And maybe we're just not ready. Maybe that's the point you're making for this next step. But I agree, something which actually gives voice to the strong but poorly informed views is probably not a good thing.
Okay, we've got one more question on this subject. I'm going to throw it only to Lyle. It's to him. It's from John Faulkner.
My question's slightly different. I'm a 65-year-old Australian Christian. At least I try to be. There are many Australian Christians who support marriage equality, but they don't remember appointing Mr Shelton and the ACL to speak on their behalf. The example of Christ is completely contrary to what the ACL is promulgating with its hate campaign. Who gave Mr Shelton and the ACL the right to speak for all Christians on the matter of marriage equality?
Okay, sorry. You're really going to have to let Lyle Shelton answer. Thank you.
Well, John, we don't claim to speak for all Christians. Yes, our name is Australian Christian Lobby, but just as the Australian Labor Party, they wouldn't claim to speak for all workers. So I think we're just being upfront and honest about our name. But certainly all of the Christian denominations in Australia, including, well, all of them except for the Quakers, who I've hardly heard of, they all support marriage between a man and a woman. That's their teaching.
40 faith leaders have
they did. I saw that, Kerryn.
From you last week.
And all of the leaders of the denominations, including Muslim community leaders, signed an open letter last year. Didn't get anywhere near the attention that these other people signed, but certainly all the leaders of the denominations support this. So we are in line with what Christian churches teach, what the Bible teaches, and I guess we're just hoping that in this plebiscite debate we can be free to put a point of view without people like Archbishop Porteous being reported to a Human Rights Commission simply for enunciating Christian teaching on a marriage in a very respectful way. This is why this debate is not fair.
He said same-sex parents mess up kids. That's not respectful.
No, he didn't actually.
Okay, I'm just going to say, unlike Parliament, people are waving around
we're allowed to have
documents and pamphlets and props without any check. I'm going to just say we're going to move on. We'll draw a line under that subject now. Remember, if you hear any doubtful claims on Q&A, send a tweet using the hashtags FactCheck and Quanda. Keep an eye on our Twitter account for fact checks by The Conversation and the ABC fact-checking unit. The next question comes from Stratos Pavlis.
Tony Abbott recently...
Well, just wait, sorry. Just get a microphone to you. Go ahead. All right.
Tony Abbott recently said that if he was still the leader of the government, that the election was winnable. He also... don't laugh. Well, he also went on... he went on to say that his 2014 controversial budget was a badge of honour. I'm just reminded that he, when he ceased to be Prime Minister, he stated that there will be a no sniping policy. Is Tony ranking a challenge, or is this not sniping?
Anna Burke, we'll start with you.
I've lived through a lot of leadership challenges. I've come out the other side. This certainly looks like sniping. And it certainly looks like, you know, I'm over being told by the Liberals, you know, Rudd, Gillard, Rudd. Well, it's been Turnbull, Abbott, Turnbull. Let's see the next iteration. And the problem is, you know, we can all joke about it, but it's actually diminishing, and I say this on behalf of my party who did it wrong as well, then unless we have stable leadership, unless we have stable government, then we don't get good outcomes. We can't have good debates. We actually can't have respectful debates about a really important issue, I think, about marriage equality and respecting marriage and respecting various people's teaching. So we need to get to a situation where politics isn't a joke. And we all take our democracy for granted. We are one of the most stable democracies in the world. Let's show it some respect from us, from the people who, you know, scratch our eyes out to get there, instead of all this carry on. And it's not about the individual. At the end of the day, none of the people in this room get to vote for the Prime Minister because the current ones are in New South Wales. So unless you're all about to move to the seat, let's also understand how our political system works. You know, you vote for lovely people like me and Bruce. Hopefully we get the majority of numbers and then we form government. So let's get back to the basics of forming good, stable government. You know, this whole debate also about Senate reform. Let's actually have a debate about good processes and we'll get better outcomes and hopefully we'll get a better economy, a better society for all of us.
Okay, Bruce Billson, the Tony Abbott question.
Yeah, look, thanks, Stratos, for your question, and I'd be a little more optimistic about the prospects of the Turnbull government, but I didn't wear a blue tie because I was worried there'd be necktie profiling tonight and had to get in the road of a good conversation. Look, the former Prime Minister's entitled to defend his legacy. He's entitled to do that, and I don't see anything inconsistent in that with the sniping issue that you're alluding to. I think he's been quite reserved. He's not offering a running commentary. I think he was right that I think the inference from the 2014 budget remark was that we collectively represent the first generation that risks compromising the great dream of our country, and that is that the next generation will have it better than us. On current trajectories, we're not going to renew that promise. And there's a need for reform to maintain growth in income and living standards and opportunity. That was the frame through which the 2014 budget.
I'm just going to quickly, Bruce, let's quickly go back to our questioner who threw his hand back up when you started.
Well, Bruce, he's basically saying, if I was still the boss, I'd be one to win the election. I mean, that's sniping, mate.
You would think, well, I'm not so sure. Maybe my 20 years in public life's made me a little more thick-skinned than that. That certainly doesn't sound like sniping to me. I mean, I could talk about great things I might be doing if I was still the small business minister. There's a show. That's a show worth having on Q&A, and that's not sniping. But so I don't read it quite that way. I mean, I think.
What about when Tony Abbott accused?
Are you jumping in on me?
I am.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I thought that was okay because we're running out of time.
Well, I thought it was a good line. You'd want more of that, but no. You go for it.
It was a good line. You got your applause.
We need to declare that we did share a stage together many years ago on aid white paper process, and I was never forgiven for recruiting you to do that job. So anyway, you were saying?
Yeah, okay, fair enough. We should move along, except for one thing, and that is that when Tony Abbott saw Kevin Rudd doing the same thing, he accused him of sniping. He said he's sitting in the wings, waiting to take over from Julia Gillard.
Look.
And I'm just wondering, now that he's doing it himself, can you see a similarity between the way he's behaving and the way Kevin Rudd behaved?
Look, in fairness to you, I'll take that as a comment.
All right. It's a legitimate cop-out from a retiring politician. There's time for one last question. It's from Hamish Jones.
The Coalition's plan to prevent preference manipulating in the Senate will obviously help allow greater transparency to suitable candidate to be elected. But in saying that, shouldn't the idea of everyday Australians be involved in Australian politics be welcomed? And maybe preference harvesting is the only way these sort of people can enter the political arena to have their voice heard.
Michele, what do you think about that?
Sorry, what was that?
It's about Senate reform, which will take away the possibility of certain people who entered the Senate entering the Senate in future Senates. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So preference harvesting. The question is essentially saying allowed ordinary Australians for the first time, people like Ricky Muir, to sort of end up in the Senate.
Look, can I just say, first of all, if an election were held today, Malcolm Turnbull would be returned, the LNP would be returned. And I think the real issues around this are that his party and he have been elected to do certain things and they're unable to do it. And I think that we can't have a situation where the party that's elected is unable to do what they've actually been elected to do. And that's what the Senate creates when you've got a Senate that simply stops things, and when you have a Senate that's not working to, I think one of you mentioned a process that we can actually rely on. Because you can see if it goes like that, we'll have another few months and then there'll be complaints that he hasn't done anything. But, you know, today, if an election were held, the Australian people still want Malcolm Turnbull and the LNP in government, so I think they should be allowed to govern and the Senate should be allowing them to do what they need to do.
So, Bruce, do you think you'd be better off with the Greens and Nick Xenophon and whoever his senators are holding the balance of power?
Look, I think if we start anticipating what the electoral outcome is and then framing our discussion on that basis, we're going into murky territory. This is simply about letting the Australian voters know where their vote's going. It's not a complicated idea. I mean, the preference whisperers are very gifted and they're using the current system as they're able to do it. But to see a person elected to the Australian Senate with 1,500 first preference votes that wouldn't even get you elected in a ward election in a local council, and then hold up the trajectory of the nation, make it impossible to hold governments to account for their promises and the commitments and the outcome they delivered to our country. I think that's not good. Having people know where their vote's going, I think that is good. So I think there's a strong case for the reforms that are being put to the Parliament.
Anna Burke, Labor's rejecting those reforms.
We think there needs to be reforms, just not the ones on the table. And we thought that, you know, they should have gone further and there should have been some other changes made. A deal was done. It's going to get up. The government's going to get its way in the Senate. So there was no use us trying to negotiate. They weren't going to negotiate with us. Should we have greater representation? Yes, we should. Should we have, you know, fixed 4-year terms? Yes, we should. Should we have, you know, fixed Senate terms that aren't out of sync? Yeah, we should. Are you going to give it to us? No, you're not. You know, every time we have a referendum on these things, it goes down in a screaming heap. So we've got to have an actual open, honest discussion about what sort of government we want. I think Senate's important. And I think if the government of the day can't get it through the Senate, it's their own fault, because they haven't been able to sell what they want to those crossbenchers to get it through.
So bring on a double dissolution election and that solve the problem.
Well, my kids would be happy because I'm retiring too. So, you know, at a personal, I don't know. I'm very conflicted about a double dissolution. And I'm not sure the government's, you know, made a case for a trigger for any of those bills coming down. And for all of us to actually understand the process and what we're buying into is complicated. And I think if we're about to have this sort of change, then we need a larger time frame to explain what you're actually going to be doing when you walk into that ballot box.
I'm told we've run out of time. I'm sorry about that. To the other panellists who might have wanted to jump in on that, that's all we have time for tonight. Please thank our panel, Kerryn Phelps, Lyle Shelton, Anna Burke, Bruce Billson and Michele Levine. Thank you. Thank you very much. You lively audience, you. Now, on next Monday, on the eve of International Women's Day, Q&A will be joined by the Minister for Employment and Women, Michele Cash, the Shadow Minister for Trade, Penny Wong, co-founder of Mamma Mia Women's Network, Amir Friedman, leading Australian broadcaster, possibly feminist, Alan Jones, and political satirist and commentator Josh Zepps. Until next week's Q&A, good night.